friends. It's Jeff. This is Around the Circle. For the sake of your heart, sometimes you need to do something different, and there's been a topic on my mind. It's been real helpful for me recently, and I just wanted to do an intro. This is not meant to be serious. All of you who get into spiral dynamics, just know I don't know much. I do know enough to get myself in trouble. I know enough to be really fascinated. I suppose I'm probably one of the few people in the world who has taught a handful of individual classes on the topic at a college, so maybe I've got that going for me. But as it stands, I know enough to get myself in trouble. That's number one. Number two, I want to talk about spiral dynamics. Spiral dynamics is similar to Enneagram. It categorizes topics that I think are really important, valuable, have a lot of explanatory power. It helps you understand yourself, your own journey in ways that have been really insightful for me. It also helps you understand history. It's got like this broader social kind of context. So spiral dynamics is a theory. And I just want to talk through this theory, and I want to talk about how it overlaps with the Enneagram. So when I come to spiral dynamics, I come to it as a theory. It's a theory, in my view, about maturity. There are predictable stages in life that you go through. There are predictable ways that human beings, as they grow, they lean into new and different values, and these take place in bursts, like revolutions. They take place in sudden, almost like converting kind of experiences. These values are beyond motive for the most part. They are values that are common to everyone. They transcend humanity, and that would be the theory. So where there are a lot of values in Enneagram, spiral dynamics is elevating a positive, in my view, that the thing that you attach to, the thing you highlight, the thing that is primary to you at a certain life stage gives you stability and a sense of direction and a sense of yourself, and it's kind of necessary. And a lot of people who are our age are kind of in that same life stage at the same time and experiencing forward motion in the same ways at the same time. So these values, spiral dynamics is going to name 7, perhaps 8 or 9. It's going to name some values. They need to get named. And what if it's true, they are predictable. Like they have the power to show you your past and where these big moments in your life were and just give language to them. And as you move forward, you're going to continue to hit some transitional moments in your life where there are some predictable questions and predictable answers. That's how spiral dynamics works. And all I'm going to do is talk through the theories. So, because it's a theory about human maturity and predictable stages, it's kind of like Hinduism. This would be an old way of thinking about this. Hinduism has a talk about life stages where you start as a student, you become a householder, you then become, I think it's a forest dweller, and then a sage. I'm probably screwing that up, but it's something of that sort where like I start here and then I go here and then I go here. There's a predictable path of human maturity. So again, very similar to the Enneagram. Enneagram's got 9 types. Imagine that there are 7 stages of human maturation and development. A potential difficulty we probably need to name up front is that spiral dynamics, the whole philosophy, comes from one of the latter stages. It's like from this point of maturity, you can kind of see this philosophy. So the theory may not be helpful for everybody. So if some of this just isn't hitting you, you can skip it, but this has been just so valuable to me. As it stands, we're all in the maturation process. We're all in the middle of getting from here to there. And some of us, the stages can sound off-putting that are quote unquote like ahead. And so just know this is just floating some ideas. Do some business with the ideas if you want to. It's really worth grabbing some paper if you can to write down some of the material. Where Enneagram talks about types through numbers, spiral dynamics talks through these stages of maturity through colors. And so and if you're listening to this while you're doing work or commuting, just kind of get the colors in your head. And I'm going to reference everything as colors. And even it's similar to being on a map. You're going to be on a map, just like in Enneagram. And just identifying where you are on the map and what you value most can be really helpful. So wisdom here is going to say that, you're on the map, let the process play out. You do business with each of these stages as you spiral upward. Upward is a value judgment, but that's what it says. And you should think, here's another kind of precursor, overly long wind up. You should think there are no good or bad stages. All these stages have value. And so just know, no good or bad. It's not bad to be a student in Hinduism or a sage in Hinduism. It's just, this is how it works, right? And just to be honest, you can't be a sage when you're 12 in Hinduism. That would probably be a mistake. So similarly with spiral dynamics, we're just going to name how maturity works, what some of the predictable movements are, and we let the values that characterize these life stages, giving them a name, where we often go. That's the big idea. So just lastly, I haven't read a book on spiral dynamics. I know there are lots of people who have put lots of thought into this. There are podcasts, there's books. None of that has really hit me. What did hit me was when I first learned this material at a conference with Rob Bell, who is a teacher. And it just popped for me. The truth of it just popped for me, and it really helped me understand a handful of things, not only in myself but in the culture at large. So, it's a system, and systems categorize, and in some ways, it might sound like it's judging. Something you should be aware of. I should be aware of. Like Enneagram has this going for it as well. It really can be a powerful tool towards judging other people's, and you should avoid that. You should avoid judging others. You should avoid judging yourself. So if you jump into this, let's just make that rule number one. We're not going to judge other people. And I think that's a healthy way to engage this, because like the Enneagram, this is a map, and it's asking you, where are you at in life? Where are you on the map? So with that wind up, let's get into this. The first color, the first stage is commonly called beige. Beige is what you're born into. You have a value. It's subconscious, and that value is survival. Nearly everything that an infant is pre-wired to pursue is their own survival. There is no, I care about other human beings going on for the most part in an infant. There's only, my needs are primary. That's a great good. If we did not have this at that stage in our life, we wouldn't survive. There's something that takes place in the human heart and mind as we develop, in which we move from survival to something else, to a different value. We begin not caring exclusively for ourselves. We start caring for another or other people. And this is the move into purple. It's the move toward family, towards tribe, toward bonding, towards relationality, towards elevating the good of others communally. And I associate this with family. I associate this with valuing blood, as it were. There's something about purple where it's us, it's our family, right or wrong. Notice the two colors. Beige, just very individually focused on itself. Sometimes this lasts beyond infancy. Like, we can point to some people in our culture, as it were, who it's just day to day, just get through, primary survival focus. No one else matters. I don't have, those connections. So like a very unhealthy picture of this might be, you might imagine the heroin addict who it's just day to day, find food, find shelter, find drink, find my fix. That's exclusively where I'm at. That person is living in that space of beige. The movement into purple says something else matters more than just myself. It's the family. And the movement toward family says their good matters most. Their survival matters most. Our survival matters most. Purple is very powerful. Powerful in the sense that it can last through an entire person's life. You can imagine those in purple space being, these are the folks who bring me safety, stability, grounding, and I make my life here. I make my identity here. That can be the people under your roof, in your family. It also can be like a community, like a church community. It can be, I'm a Denver Bronco fan, and this is my family and my tribe. It can be your political affiliation, like we solidify, and I give everything to this small group. I find all of my identity in that space. The best picture might be like a mafia organization where we're the family. We're the family. We look out for each other, right or wrong, and we do what's necessary for the family to survive. Very tribal, right? Beige, purple. The third stage is red. What's really interesting is that a lot of movies are actually about the journey from purple to red. And it's the move from I was part of the tribe to I need to get out on my own, establish my own strength, and show that I have what it takes. Red values ego, my own power. Red values I can do it. Red values strength and exerting one's influence over the world. It can be very sexual at times. It's a very domination-centric space. It's a place we need to engage because maturity often requires us to fly from the nest. Maturity often encourages us to say, I have found my identity in the family for too long, and I need to leave for my own sake. I need to trust my own power, my own strength. I need to get out there, become something bigger, and Red insists on this. Red insists that we have what it takes. Red insists that we can stand up and be our own person, and that can be a great good. And when coming to spiral dynamics, many of us will have experienced this. So we've experienced this personally. We've also experienced this as parents. We've watched our children grow up and go through this, and it actually can be kind of heartbreaking. We're like, oh, you were part of the family, and now you're wearing those clothes and going out with those people and choosing that job and moving to that state, and we're brokenhearted because they left the nest. They left our purple home, as it were. They were in purple, and they considered the family their identity, but they have had to stretch out their arms, and they've moved into that new value of finding their own strength. Because this is such a part of the process of life, those who are not in purple or red as their primaries often see the stages and actually respond to them intuitively. So great teachers elevate students. They move them from purple to red. Great parents elevate their kids to stand on their own 2 feet, do life on their own, and they understand you need to fly from the nest. And that's what makes you a good teacher. Your students can stand up and do it. It makes you a good parent. That's what you are supposed to do. You're supposed to have your kids cease to be children, and they become something bigger. They become your friends, even though they're still perhaps your student, your son, or your daughter. That's a very valuable move to go from purple to red. And I think most of us recognize this transition, valuing blood to valuing ego. This is part of the human story. And we probably remember when it happened to us, if it happened. We know what it's like to have left the nest. What ends up happening in red, however, is also predictable. And many of us are very aware of this because red comes with some critical defects. Ego. When the id, as it were, is given power, it can do great damage. It can do damage to yourself. It can do damage to others. The thing about red is red wants to take over the world at some levels. Red wants to exert its will at these high places and dominate. Red wants us to use the power that we have to establish our priority list. Red can be very destructive on these fronts. When red is given the wheel for too long, and governed without wisdom, many of us know what it's like to be in red space and to crash. This is predictable, right? So presently I'm associating red space with kind of like the manosphere. I don't know anything about the manosphere, by the way. I'm less familiar with the manosphere than I am with spiral dynamics. But I get the sense that it's guys saying, you need to stand up. You need to get your body in shape. You need to go out and dominate your work. You need to have sex with lots of people. You need to, and there's like exerting your power and strength in the world. That's an unhealthy expression. I suppose maybe a healthier expression is like listening to a Tony Robbins say, you can stand up. You have what it takes. You can do it. You can be successful. those sorts of people. And sometimes we need those sorts of people in our lives because that's where we find ourselves. We just need to feel strong for a minute. Nothing wrong with that. But it is the case that, again, it has a severe ceiling. When you try to exert your will into the world at those levels, you can become an unhealthy person, egocentric person, and you can crash. You can do lots of damage in that crash. And the thing about red space is that, again, the crash is going to come because you can't lift 10,000 pounds. You can't dominate the world. There's only a sliver of people who actually get really, really far in life in red space. And normally these are some of the worst people there are. The ego takes over and it's higher, faster, louder, up and to the right, and they just trample everyone. This isn't a healthy person. And red needs to come to an end, even though it's so important to get there in some sense. But eventually, here's the thing for red is that your weakness will get exposed. Weakness is exposed because red, it seems to me, becomes very easily addicted. For example, we become workaholics, or we become alcoholics, we become dominationaholics. And eventually that's going to catch up to us to the point where something happens. We hit the wall. We find ourselves on the kitchen floor, asking, we're covered in tears and vomit or divorce papers. And we're asking the question, how did my life become unmanageable? I need to get control of this because I'm out of control. Ego easily becomes out of control. It doesn't have a break. For the most part, what you need is something else, and this is the predictable move from red space to blue space. The kind of control that we see here is what we see in some 12-step programs. These are designed for people moving out of red space into blue space. A lot of religious traditions are designed to move from red to blue space, or at least that's how they function. I was at my end, and then I found Jesus. There's a severe move there. And again, the movement in between values feels like a conversion. And often when talking about conversion, this is exactly what comes to many of our minds. It's the movement out of red space into blue space. All the transitions that we're going to talk about between colors end up having that dynamic of some value is severely replaced by a different value. And that new value brings context, hope, insights. It's often very helpful in our lives. So a lot of the religious traditions, to sum this up, are designed to move us from red to blue space. They are asking, what are the rules, values? What's an ethical system? What's a framework that brings context to my life so that all that energy from the ego can get poured into some channels that have stability overseeing them, meaning overseeing them? What is the system I can embrace to get my life under control and pointed in the quote unquote right direction? This move can be very helpful. It's the move away from ego into, let's call this belief. Belief becomes the primary value for blue, and belief has a ton of power to shape us. A lot of people will end up staying in blue for the rest of their lives, and this may be a great good for them, right? They will have had the dark night of the soul that culminates in a conversion experience, and the belief saved them. That's a big word, by the way, in blue space. I was saved. The belief saved them and is powerful and will be part of their story. And it's a story they're going to tell for the rest of their lives. This is a great good. And for a lot of people, you can look at them from outside and just say, look, I celebrate the fact that this brought context to your life. I'm so glad that you were able to move from red into something else. You were an alcoholic and now you got your life together through these systems, and that can be very valuable. Blue and belief is about, getting some control through the system. Blue is going to bring something that red doesn't have. It's going to bring meaning to your life. Blue is answering bigger questions. What's it all about? What's your purpose? What are the ethical rules that you should embrace that bring stability and allow you to flourish? Blue is interested in those big sweeping questions. And what's interesting is blue, like purple, is actually a communal space. So notice this. Beige and red are both very individualistic, but purple and blue are very communal. And we'll see this throughout spiral dynamics. It's like we go from the individual to the communal, to the individual to the communal in our values. It's real interesting. That's kind of a footnote. But the thing about blue is it's not enough to have your own personal spirituality in blue for the most part. Blue loves to become an institution. Blue loves to have conferences. Blue loves to have church services, as it were. Blue loves to say about itself, you believe in the Enneagram. I believe in the Enneagram. It's done so much for me. It is individual work that has to be done in community, according to Stabile. You can see that even though it's an individual form of spirituality, it ends up being communal. So let's talk about Enneagram, because now we can talk about Enneagram in the context of these first 4 colors. Enneagram can be inserted into all of these colors, and your experience of the Enneagram can be enjoyed at all of these stages. And it's really worth naming, because if you're actually doing thoughtful business with the Enneagram and saying, this is the purpose of my life right now, it might just give you a little bit of context in that blue space, for example. If you're doing thoughtful business with the Enneagram and saying, this is where I am in life, here's the primary value I have, it's purple, it's my family, and so I'm using the Enneagram exclusively. It's about our family. We need to get our family healthy. This is what the tool is for. Red, I need to know my superpowers. I need to know my strengths. I need to get past some of the things that would be obstacles and really feel myself in the world. Enneagram has some power in that space. In blue space, what has God made you to be? In your type, here are the deadly sins. Here are the holy virtues. Blue space is going to elevate some of those ethics that bring a lot of stability, context, and reason to us. And so blue ends up having just a ton of power when overlaid with, or when the Enneagram is put into blue space, it has a lot of power, right? So throughout this whole rest of these colors, as I unpack them, you might be asking, where are you at? And how does it overlap with the Enneagram? This is going to go for students. Like, where am I as a student learning about the Enneagram? This will also be applied to teachers. Teachers will teach to a color. So as I said before, like Tony Robbins is teaching to red space. You do it, you have what it takes, you can elevate. And that ends up being really helpful for those in red space. Tony Robbins may not be in red space. He may be down the road a little bit, but he's teaching to folks in that space, right? Some people in blue space are being taught by people who are in a different space. And that's kind of how things work. So just knowing who you are as a student and perhaps who you're learning from as a teacher, or perhaps who you are as a teacher, might be incredibly important. Last word on blue is that here's the thing about beliefs. Beliefs are not proven. Beliefs are assumed, especially big beliefs. For me, and I've written books on this, I'm a philosopher. I've got my graduate degree in the philosophy of religion, and I'm very aware of the epistemology here. Beliefs at foundational levels are assumed specifically about spiritual things, about things of meaning. Most people don't really have arguments for God's existence like they think they do. Oftentimes, God is assumed, and then that belief colors everything else that they see and believe. That is just how it works. Oftentimes, the opposite is true. If you don't believe in God, it's often assumed, and it just brings your perspective to everything else. That's where I come from. So for example, there's lots of beliefs that we have like this. For example, most of us believe there's an external world out there that's separate from our consciousness, but you can't prove that. All you're experiencing is your consciousness, is your field of consciousness. But is there an external world that is identical to your field of consciousness? That can't be proven. That is something that's assumed. It's just presupposed that my consciousness gives me reliable information about the world out there. Beliefs in blue space really work like that, where I believe some big things about the world and about my identity, and about God and about my soul and about perhaps the future, and that just brings value, context, meaning to where I'm going. And so when talking with people about their beliefs, especially from their movement from red to blue, they will push into language like, I was saved. I was at my worst spot, and then this thing happened. It brought context, stability to my life. I became a person who was better. because it rescued me from my alcoholism or my self-focus, and I experienced things that were so much bigger than myself. These things are just true of a lot of people's experience in blue space. Now, one thing worth noting, because I brought up teachers, in this space, in blue space has leaders. There's the same sort of leaders kind of emerge in blue space. We might call them priests or pastors. They're the spiritual leaders, right? All of the colors are going to have folks who end up leading. It's really worth naming, so in beige space, the leader is yourself. You're an individual. But in purple space, that family space, of course, the leader will be one of the parents or the set of parents, or I suppose in a family space, it might be a very animated, aggressive child. In red space, it becomes more the autocrat. It becomes the domineering figure. And here in blue space, it becomes that spiritual leader who can tell the story of belief in a way that's effective and powerful and connects with your heart. And it's just worth naming. I'm going to talk probably about teachers and leaders in future episodes at aroundthecircle.org. If you get into this stuff, I may pitch some stuff about spiral dynamics in the future like this, because again, this is just something good for my heart right now. And it's giving me so much context, especially of all things in some of the relationships I have that aren't going the way that I really would want them to go. But I think it's real valuable. But here's the thing about blue. Blue ends up being challenged eventually. Not because it's not good or hasn't done wonderful things for us. Blue gets challenged because as we mature, we begin to become more thoughtful and more critical. And sometimes the question becomes, why should I believe blue? Beliefs are assumed, but something new comes in when we say, why should I believe blue? We see this again across all cultures right now, especially if a blue system has hurt me or hurt people that I care about or hurt the people that we love, blue has that power to hurt people. The language that we see in our culture presently of deconstruction is all over this. I began to give power. I was in blue space for a while, but then I started to question it. And notice what happens there. We move from belief as our primary value to something else, to reason as our primary value. When we start giving power to reason begins to question things. Reason begins to pull things apart and asks, why should I believe this? Reason is an incredibly powerful tool. Reason questions, it asks for logical arguments, it asks for soundness, it judges, it critiques. More important than anything, it says, I'm devoted to the truth over and above anything else. Now, a lot of us live in that space. This is going to be orange space. The movement from blue to orange can often be severe. I was a very religious person, started questioning it, ended up moving away from my church family, my spiritual practices. I started analyzing them like some unhealthy forms of blue. And this is, again, something I want to talk about in the future, like unhealthy and healthy forms of these colors. But we will know severely unhealthy forms of blue are cults, and you need to be saved from cults, as it were. Often salvation from cults looks like reason suddenly taking power, questioning the leader, questioning what they say, and saying, you know what, this doesn't stand up and I'm going to leave. A lot of us who live in orange space or have been in orange space at one point in time, at that point in time, we're saying, look, I'm devoted to the truth. And it's just obvious that the truth is worthy of devotion. Why wouldn't you be devoted to the truth? And the thing is, many people aren't there yet. We haven't realized this. A lot of people aren't devoted to the truth yet because they have those other values, the values associated with those other colors. And sometimes truth gets in the way, and they have to still go through those stages of maturity to eventually get to the place where they elevate truth over everything else. And this is a very difficult move. It isn't easy at all to say, I'm going to hold to what is true, even though it hurts, right? As the saying goes, truth is like poetry. And most people fucking hate poetry. That's the thing about truth. Truth cuts, it demands, it especially puts constraints on blue space, on purple space. It has the ability to slice apart those values. It says specifically a blue space, it says, prove yourself or you're not worthy of my devotion. It says to the priest or the pastor or the person who's telling the story, you need to justify your ideas. It's not enough to be up there with a microphone saying the Lord said. It's got to be something bigger than that that appeals to my reason. This is what orange space does. It is reason is primary. Reason ends up being the dominating force. It's going to guide my life according to the dictates of logic, reason, insight, empirical analysis, data. That's the space of orange space, right? Orange also is very interesting in that it is wholly committed to what works. Orange is very interested in elevating science. Science does a great job of proving what orange space desires most. Here's how the natural world functions and the predictable outcomes. If we mix this chemical and this chemical, this will happen. Orange space loves that sort of stuff. Science says, here's the system. It routinely produces the results. Those results, let's talk historically for a minute. Science has allowed our species to create vastly more calories, more medicines. We can communicate across the planet instantaneously now. When we have tooth surgery, it doesn't hurt us the way it used to, and we would suffer for months because one of our teeth is infected. All these things came out of orange space. Orange space is a spot where we pause and say, it doesn't matter what you feel about this thing. What matters most is what reason says. And so let's pause here. I had mentioned this, that there's a huge overlap between spiral dynamics and not only our individual journey. Here's how we mature. Notice all of these colors become systemic and often govern time periods. That might be a jump, but think about Western culture for a minute. I want you to imagine thousands of years ago. We are prehistory, prehistoric human beings. We know prehistoric human beings are tribal. They survive in packs. They survive in family groups, right? They are purple. That is how, like pre-civilization, that's how human beings, they tribe up, right? If you remain in beige space as a prehistoric person, you will not survive. You will not pass on your seed. You will be in danger. You will not be able to fight effectively. The thing about the tribe is it provides places for protection, resource accumulation, procreation. It allows the species to go from here to there. Purple's really great at that. And that's why it's our tribe, right or wrong. Red space comes in with the ancient period. The ancient period is characterized by some people rising to power in ways that they dominate all the tribes. In Western culture, and let's just talk about Western culture, you're going to see this in the imperial movements. So like Egypt and the pharaohs, like if you're familiar with the Bible, like they are dominating whole swaths of land, as it were, and whole people groups. You have the Syrian Empire. You have Alexander the Great. You have eventually the Roman Empire. You have Genghis Khan. All of these ancient structures, power structures, are generally accompanied by a new technology that emerges. So Genghis Khan is able to dominate literally millions of acres of land because he discovers the bow and arrow and horseback riding. It allows him to dominate. The Romans are able to dominate through a form of terrorism called crucifixion. If you don't pay taxes to Caesar and do what Caesar says, we will nail you to these boards in the middle of the city. You and your family, everyone will watch you die a slow, horrible death. Red is about domination. It's about ego and exerting its will. The ancient world is the world of these sorts of leaders, the autocrats, the Caesars. The red ancient period requires kneeling and devotion. The tyrant wants your unquestioned devotion. And we often, people of the ancient period would act in self-defense. They kneel to Caesar, as it were. Red, historically, is replaced by blue. This is really interesting. The ancient world is is superseded by the medieval period. Medieval period is about belief being the new power. It's the new thing that unites. We're tired of being terrified by the Caesars executing us. We're going to rally around and we're going to unite across the tribes, across the nations under a belief system. So the Roman Empire becomes the Holy Roman Empire. We move from Caesar as Lord to Jesus as Lord. And that's a huge part of the movement from the ancient world into the medieval world. Medieval world lasts for about 1,000 years. Like Augustine is writing somewhere in the 300s, I want to say. Rome falls around that time as well. And the Renaissance, which then moves into the age of enlightenment and the modern period. What characterizes the move into the modern period is exactly what we saw. The movement from blue, belief, to orange, reason. The Enlightenment is all about questioning blue beliefs with orange reason. And reason becomes what's dominant. So you go from, structures that are predicated on the divine right of kings to saying, what does reason say about how we should organize our society and create power structures? And what reason says is that everybody is filled with reason. All men are equal, created with divine purposes and the rest, and should have a voice of a certain sense. The Declaration of Independence is a statement from orange space against blue space. And it's saying we're going to do things differently as we move into the future because the monarchy that is propped up by blue beliefs isn't working anymore, and there needs to be a revolution. We could talk all about power structures here because sometimes you're moving to like the Protestant Reformation is still a blue Reformation. It's just saying we need different beliefs to replace these other beliefs. Sometimes reason, or there's different, how should we organize an orange space is also up in question. But reason often kind of hits some stuff that says this is what works. So out of the modern period, democracy, representative government really is elevated. Lincoln, you read the Gettysburg Address, he is saying government by the people, for the people is the goal. Shouldn't perish from the earth. That's why we're fighting. Modern period is characterized by science. You see a severe decrease in child mortality and a severe increase in the population once the modern period starts, and it's because of scientific discoveries. And the other thing that comes in is capitalism, especially in the West. We begin to organize not according to the fiat declarations of the person in charge, the king. We shift towards a system that seems to be efficacious. Capitalism, as it goes, the invisible hand is guiding human affairs, and capitalism is able to build enormous structures all over the earth. This is what characterizes the modern period. Now, let me talk about the next color through history first, and then we can talk about how it works inside of ourselves. But what we learn in history is that science, it doesn't fail because it is predictable. What science does is it creates certain things that have the power to destroy all life on Earth. It's very good at showing us how we can manipulate the natural order. But when you create nuclear weapons that can eliminate all life on the planet, this is unacceptable. This is repugnant. It's a repugnant end that we have come to. You're like, we can now destroy all life. What do? We need something different that can, is beyond just reason being able to create higher, faster, louder. This is true. So something new needs to happen. A new color needs to emerge. Capitalism is the same way. We are beginning to notice today, have been noticing for a while perhaps, there's a big conversation taking place that does capitalism allow everyone to flourish, or does it allow only the few people who are really, 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 really good at allocating capital and passing it on to their children to take all the world's resources, right? The conversation around the 1%. In some fashion, creating systems that just enslave everybody is one of the faces of unrestrained capitalism. And if reason is going to lead us to that system, if capitalism is just, it gives us more calories, more medicines, more travel, more communication, of course I can watch football anywhere in the world. Yet capitalism, when it's combined with science, it can create these things, but it can also do great damage and leave some people in economic distress, slavery, etc. And this is a big, big challenge to orange, right? So a lot of the conversation that we see in our culture right now is between orange and this next color that we'll talk about, or between, even orange and red. And lastly, we're seeing democracy have a difficult time. It's overlap with capitalism, a difficult time, because as many have pointed out, there's so much money in the democratic process right now. It's questionable whether we actually have a democratic process. So science, democracy, capitalism, all of these are reaching tension points where we're questioning them collectively of, are these things working? And what is being advanced is that new color, and that color is green. We need to discover a new value for the sake of the conversation. The nuclear weapons conversation is where this starts. Like, we need to get together with our enemies, or else we're going to kill all of ourselves, right? Kennedy talks about how we all share, we all breathe the same air, we all care about our children's futures, and we all inhabit this small planet. Kennedy shifts from saying, look, we can't go higher, faster, louder. We need to get around a table with our enemies and start having conversations. That conversation is the green conversation. Green says, let's get together around the table and hear the voices of everybody. The workers, the poor, those who are part of the minority groups who have been oppressed for centuries, those who are our enemies. People who are still in blue space need to be invited to the table. The red people need to be invited to the table. We just need to get around the table, and we need to talk about what it looks like to see one another's perspectives. In green space, the voices of everybody matter, and they matter equally. Equality and harmony are the values of green space. Equality and harmony are the topic. Equality and harmony emerge when you have a round table and everybody gets to speak. The result is everybody feels heard, and we don't have to kill one another as we go higher, faster, louder. And this is the value. Something else that moves here is the movement away from objectivity in modern space, in the orange space. Green space is going to elevate subjectivity. Orange loves what's objective. Science proves, logic proves. These are the things we can know and what we can use to advance ourselves. That's orange space. Green space says everything is subjective. All truth is a perspective. And so this is the move from the modern to the postmodern. What postmodernity says is there is no truth. There's only perspectives. So finding movement, finding what's best, means I need to come around the table with others who have those different perspectives on the matter. Different perspectives than mine. And when we communicate to one another, when we love each other, when we care for each other's voices, not only will we not kill each other, which is really a primary aim, but we're also going to create economic systems that benefit everybody. This is the challenge to capitalism. We're going to put restraints on science. Science, and we're seeing this with conversations around AI, with conversations around the technologies used by policing in our country right now. And science around chemical weapons developments, and especially biological weapons. All of these, we can see how science out of control can do huge damage, right? We need to get around the table, benefit everybody economically, put restraints on all of these weapons, and perhaps do business with our way of government and saying, look, money pouring into our democratic process is eliminating the voices of the people. That's a great harm, and so we need to do business there. So alongside postmodernity starts around the year 1930, 40, 50. What we start to see is more multiculturalism, the voices of everyone coming to the front. Multiculturalism comes out of this. Subjectivity matters. And so what matters in conversation is naming your biases. And so as we move into green space, it's not just critiques of science, capitalism, and democracy. One of the things, and this is important for our conversation, one of the things that come out is, and I'm thoroughly committed to this, is Enneagram may be very old, but Enneagram did not come into prominence until we hit green space, because green space is about naming your biases, naming your subjectivity, naming how you come to the world and how your motive influences everything else. So Enneagram didn't appear until this point in time when we started asking, how do you see the world, and trying to understand this. Enneagram, in my view, is very subjective, and it's exposing our lens. It's exposing how we see ourselves and the world, and it's asking those questions of motive. How does our motive color everything else? It is a study of subjectivity, and that is a very postmodern way of coming to the world. So we could play this out. There are 9 different perspectives. And one of the great goods of Enneagram is, like, when we get in a room with a handful of people who do cohorts, or like the panels I'm trying to fashion, we get in the same room with people who share different types than ours, and we're hearing language from what seem to be vastly different perspectives, different takes on the world, sets of priorities. And when we get together and talk about more than ourselves, then we start learning something new about what it means to be human, that is more of that round table. Like, it's a truth that's being exposed that isn't just orange, higher, faster, louder. Now, here's the thing about green, and we're starting to learn this. Sometimes those we invite to the round table are not good people, or their excesses are too much and they dominate the table, right? In my view, when you invite the fascists to the discussion table, it does damage. We're learning this because when you invite the fascists to the table, they shoot everyone at the table and then they take over the round table, right? That is one of the places green goes and has to wrestle with. Like, we were open to everybody's perspective, and then suddenly it's taken over. So green has a severe ceiling. And unfortunately, it's that some people at the table are really unhealthy or in excess. In Enneagram language, it's something to the effect of, your type is not an excuse for bad behavior. That invites perspective. That invites judgment and discernment and wisdom. It invites a critique of the people sitting in 4 space or 6 space or 1 space and saying, look, you guys in 1 spaces, you're in excess. I realize your voice matters in these spaces, but they need to be tempered and thought through. Green says there is no judgment. We're just listening to everybody and the truth will emerge. The move from green into the last color we're going to talk about, yellow, comes in here. Yellow says there are some perspectives that cause damage and they need to be moderated, tempered. There needs to be wisdom and context, and we need to aim at something more than harmony and equality. We need to aim at health and wisdom. These are the last 2 values, and we're going to stop with yellow, even though there's some other colors we could talk about. Yellow wants to elevate health, wisdom. We do want to hear from everybody, but there are some people who just want to take the microphone at the table and then beat everybody with their microphone. This can't function. We can't function that way. So the thing about yellow is it starts doing really interesting business from what some people want to call a second tier. Spiral dynamics is itself a yellow philosophy. Spiral dynamics says I'm able to see those who are in red space, those who are in blue space, those who are in orange space, those who are in green space, those who are in purple and beige. And I'm able to see not only that that's where other people are at, but that I myself still have an anchor in each of these colors. I can look at my own life and see that there's parts of me that are still in beige, still in purple, still in blue, still in green, still in orange. And sometimes the best thing I can do is elevate that value. Sometimes ego needs to get elevated. Sometimes reason needs to get elevated and belief pulled back. But other times belief needs to get elevated and reason pulled back. Being able to balance the colors in myself is personal work. being able to understand that other people come to their stages of maturity out there is what it looks like to be a gracious person, a wise person, an understanding person, somebody who can navigate the world in a way that gets where people are coming from, challenges them when they need to be challenged, and elevate voices when they need to be elevated. This is something that yellow does really well. And so from yellow space, you can actually watch people in purple and say you do need to stretch your arms out and move into red space and find your strength. From yellow space, you can look at people in red space and say, you motherfuckers need to find Jesus. From yellow space, you can look at those in blue and say, look, the religious system and belief that you are holding to has power and is doing damage to yourself and to the community that you love. And we need to think about inviting reason into those spaces. It can come in and challenge reason and say what is pragmatic isn't always what's good. It can come in and challenge green space and say, yes, I realize everybody's voice needs to be elevated, but sometimes that can be the road towards foolishness and self-destruction. It can do so outside yourself. It can also do so within yourself. Yellow space is that space where it's looking at the whole picture. And this is why spiral dynamics is a yellow philosophy or theory in and of itself. It's able to look at it all, bring some wisdom to the table. That strikes me as just really valuable. So I want to just end with some reflections, and then I may release some other reflections in the future. Once you have this foundation, it's like Enneagram. You can start talking about other topics, leadership, being a student, some of the overlaps of colors. There are some people who are kind of living in that blue-orange space, which is kind of interesting. It's just worth talking about. So pausing, I just want to talk about my own experience of the Enneagram and how it would overlap with some of these stages. When I came to Enneagram study, there was a severe overlap with me and actually purple space. When I came to Enneagram, I was losing my church family. That doesn't feel like it's purple. It feels like it's blue, but it wasn't for me. A lot of my church work, the reason I got into church work was because I wanted a family. And because my family was kind of falling apart, Enneagram was language that allowed me to reconnect with myself, with my wife, with my kids, and with the people that I was trying to serve in that space. I was trying to improve, and that's a very one-ish way of coming to Enneagram and to where I was. But following that, I really got into the study of looking at Enneagram for like the naming the superpowers you have. I'm so self-critical as a one naturally, subconsciously, that I would just beat myself up most of the time. What Enneagram did for me is it invited me into red space. Here's where you're amazing. This is where you do things really well. This is the value you bring to other people's lives. And getting language around that was really helpful for me. Getting through that space, Enneagram overlapped real cleanly with blue space. And a lot of us, when, coming to Enneagram, it may have been through blue space. Blue and Enneagram overlap in a lot of ways. The form of Christianity I was part of in 2016, a lot of people were getting into Enneagram because it was a new language, a language for sin, a language for virtue, a language for how we're connected to one another through the God that made us. And here are helpful practices. Here are the holy ideas. All of that can be a very blue framework. And it just overlapped, You're coming to Enneagram as a mystical tool for self-betterment. And all of that's just very blue in orientation. Many of us know, it's not just that some people's work in the teens was very, the marriage of evangelicalism and Enneagram, which was real common. But obviously in America, Enneagram came through the Jesuits is what it sounds like. And it culminates in Richard Rohr's work. And that's just where the seedbed was. Recently, and you'll see this in my work, a lot of my pivoting has been pivoting from blue space into orange space because I've started really finding that I want to elevate the reason behind Enneagram. I want to give justification for it. And so I've jumped into Dr. Daniel Siegel's work, UCLA professor of neuroscience, elevating. This is how the neural pathways in your brain are channeled and how the energy flows through them. And because it flows through them, it creates 9 different personality types. He does great work on this, very scientifically grounded. And Siegel's work is in orange space, right? And it's asking, how does this work? What's the science behind it? And that's a way to come to Enneagram as well. We can go further and we can see others who have moved out of orange space or even skipped orange space at some levels and gotten into green space. And they're saying we come to the Enneagram, and it's not just about understanding each of our types, but also in understanding Enneagram itself. There is a 2 interpretation of Enneagram. There's a 6 interpretation of Enneagram. There's 9 interpretation of Enneagram. If you were to ask all the different types, what is the Enneagram? They might give very different answers that are very similar given their types. It's also the case there's a handful of great books that want to elevate the perspective of this group of people, this race, this nationality, and their take on Enneagram. Here's the Japanese perspective on Enneagram. Here's the African American perspective on Enneagram. Here's the queer interpretation of Enneagram. All of those can be really, really helpful. They're very much green space, and they elevate something that we need to wrestle with. It's a meta level conversation, and it's the sort of conversation I'm having right now with you. The pivot into yellow space is when you start asking the question, what is the proper function of the Enneagram? What should the Enneagram be used for? Beyond all of our different perspectives on it, what should? It's asking questions of judgment. Yellow is a very judging, we're looking for wisdom, we're looking for what's healthy kind of space. It's inviting a meta level conversation, and that's the sort of conversation I'm having with you in terms of this whole podcast. It's when you get into yellow with the Enneagram, the question becomes, let's talk about what this is for. Let's find out what is wise when we're using this tool. And a lot of my work personally has been kind of in that orange space where I'm doing business with the science, and a lot of it's in yellow space, coming to the question of what is the Enneagram and what is it for? And so that's what I got. This is my intro to spiral dynamics and maturity and just the process that we all go through. I have lots of more thoughts on this, which you'll be shocker that I want to unpack this more. I will do so at aroundthecircle.org exclusively. I'm not going to be putting spiral dynamics stuff on this Enneagram feed, but if you want to see my posts on this, just go aroundthecircle.org, sign up for a free membership. You will get my emails that say, hey, I'm posting on this. It's also the case that if there's a lot of interest in this, I may have a discussion group, like maybe we do a weekend workshop, that's like a couple hours and we just talk about it. So if you're interested, just tell me you're interested and we'll do something fun. So cheering for you, cheering for your future. I hope that this was edifying. And again, send me your thoughts. Do post your thoughts. I don't often ask for comments very often, but this time I would like comments. Go to Around the Circle, comment on this post. I would love to hear your thoughts, and I appreciate you, all you do for me. May all good things be yours.
Somebody told me that if you